Hey guys, welcome back. Robocraft early access coverage. This is episode 96. I'm Enigmaeus, and today, many changes. What you're seeing here is me putting the finishing touches on the layout for the guns on the Panther B that we started in the last episode. We haven't even put the legs on yet, and it is just absolutely massive. Vertically, it's huge. From front to back, it's huge. It's just the only thing that could be bigger is side to side. It could stand to be a little bit wider. If we wanted to take up the whole bay, that's what we would have to do. So I scrapped it and I started messing around with this. We changed the orientation of the rotor blades. There's 8 of them instead of 12, and they're aligned a little bit differently, but you can still see the framework for the guns is ludicrous. It's enormous, and it's flimsy. It's extremely flimsy. That's the kind of thing where you take a good plasma volley from a bomber or a drone when you're sitting up on a ledge zoomed in on your next victim and all of your guns are gone. Like, that's the kind of setup that it is, and you know that we aren't going to do that. We've poked fun at too many people for doing it. We can't start doing it ourselves. But I needed to mess around with some things and come up with some ideas because what we were looking at wasn't working. We're talking about using legs, which are enormous, and rotor blades, which are enormous, and railguns, which are enormous, and trying to put them into a small frame is pretty much impossible. When you get right down to it, expecting it to be a small bot is not a realistic ask, but at the same time, we don't necessarily want to use that as justification to make it as large as it wants to be. We need to kind of control this somehow, and really, the only way that we could do that, unfortunately, it's not that it's a horrible thing, but this is the second iteration since we started building in the last episode, was to strip it down and start with the gun layout first. One of the things that I noticed just messing around with different things is that if you put the front legs close enough together, they will actually by themselves tilt the bot up on a pretty crazy angle without having to do a whole lot by way of extra building out the rear legs or anything so that it tips up the bot. So that's one of the things that we could keep in mind, and I actually found that out because I was trying to do a layout with all of the legs on the bot just so that the CPU would be accounted for when I was building out other things. And in testing it with the legs on the back the way that they were, very close together, it was tilted up at like a 45-degree angle with the legs just kind of clinging to the ground. And I thought, hey, that's something we might be able to use that's going to reduce the size. So as we've done in the past, we're going back to laying out the guns with the white cubes. We want to try and get everything in place. We want to get all the components on so that we can see what we have left by way of CPU, because we have been running out of CPU, and you can also see we've been running out of black cubes. I had just over 600, or sorry, not black cubes, black prisms. I had just over 600 tier 10 black prisms when we started this build and we ran out. And it's not that big in terms of the frame itself. In terms of the dimensions, it's huge, but there's a lot of space between the blocks. I mean, it's not a particularly robust frame, especially where the weapons are mounted. All of those blocks pretty much went into the chassis that's holding the rotor blades. Not ideal. So there were a few things that I've been trying to avoid with this. One is when we've got the rotor blades oriented so that we've got one upside down and then another one on top of it or below it, basically occupying a very similar space, is not to set ourselves up so that if a direct hit to the framework between the two goes just right, that you can destroy both rotor blades with one shot. That's kind of the exact opposite of the effect that we're going for. We want redundancy, and by allowing the build to make it so that those kinds of shots can take out 2 rotor blades at a time, we're basically wasting our time in terms of adding all that extra CPU for the rotor blades if they're going to be disappearing in pairs, so to speak. So we want to be very careful about how we're setting those up, which requires more space. But one of the things that I've discovered is that the way that we're building it here is we have one on top and then we have another one upside down beneath it with space in between so that we can build out the connections for both without the damage transferring directly between the two. if we take and we put the top ones upside down and the ones underneath right side up, we don't have to have as much block space in between, or sorry, adding onto the whole connection as we would if we were doing it the other way around. It may not make sense the way I'm describing it now, but you can see here the way we've got this one is upside down, and then we're going to build it out and put another one right side up directly beneath it. We don't have to have 4 to 5 extra layers of blocks added onto this structure in order to get everything connected the way that we want it to be done. So we're going to save a little bit of space and a little bit of CPU that way, but more importantly, just trying to get everything laid out so that everything fits. Now, one of the things that I've decided to do in order to support having a bot that isn't quite so vertically disgusting is to move the rotors way out to the sides. That's like we were talking about in the last one. The only place we had left to go to build out the bot, if we wanted to, was way out to the sides. So in this case, I've decided we're going massive one way or the other, whether we want to or not. If we're going to get this bot built, it's going to be big. Try and lower the profile a little bit so that it's not quite so huge, to the point where someone can just hold down the fire button on an SMG for maximum range and hit the bot consistently, because even the spray pattern isn't big enough to cause the kinds of misses that would penalize their accuracy at such a range. So there's all kinds of thought processes going on in my mind in terms of the different things that we're adding to the bot, why we're adding them, what they require, what we need to get out of them, and whether or not it works is sort of the thing. So this is now the 3rd iteration since we started this project yesterday, and it's the 4th iteration since we started the Panther B altogether. So it's very challenging builds in order to make it work, just because it's the size of everything. There's no getting around it. But we'll find a way to make it work, or we'll just put the blocks away and save them for a megabot, one way or the other. Here I set up the ones in the back, and then I realized I could probably bring them in closer to the chassis. We've got sort of the room for the pilot seat, where it is now in the little pod with the black prisms, not necessarily where it's going to stay. I'm more interested right now in getting the guns, the rotors, and ultimately the legs set up in a way that makes sense. So for now, you can still see it's massive. Like, it's absolutely enormous. There's no getting around that. But it's a little bit better organized than it has been. And one of the concerns that I had with the CPU, with running out of CPU and running out of blocks, is that if we run out of CPU and all we've got are these flimsy little connections holding things together, we either have to start cutting components, or we have to go into matches with those crappy little connections, and that's not something that I'm prepared to do. I actually, as I was thinking of testing this, I just absent-mindedly I hit the keys to enter a match instead of to enter the practice map. And for those of you who aren't aware, at this particular time in Robocraft's history, by the time this video is a few months old, the queue system is a little bit broken. So you can queue and then you hit escape. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to queue, escape. And the interface goes away to make you think, okay, you're not queued anymore. And then I hit the keys to go into the practice map, and simultaneously it tried to pull me into a match, even though I had said, no, I don't want to go into one. And I ended up in this very strange sort of purgatory where I was in a match, but I couldn't see anyone, and I couldn't move, I couldn't escape out, I couldn't self-destruct, I couldn't do anything. And then after a very long delay, all of a sudden my bot just erupted in all this blue weapons fire, because I guess people saw this white block frame for this crazy railgun bot, and they started shooting at it, and it all got caught up at the same time with all the lag. And then I still couldn't move, but I could see them driving by looking at me. You could see their guns turning as they went by, and I felt a little bit silly, but there was nothing that I could do, because I had to tab out of the game and force close it in order to get out of it. It was crazy. It was horrible. I felt very bad for that team because I had to abandon them early in the match. But even if I thought the bot was battle ready, it was still broken. I couldn't control anything. There was nothing that I could do to help my teammates, so we had to go. So now we're getting to kind of the end of where I'm going to get it today. We're going to finish this off. We're going to get the legs now in the front where they're going to end up in the final iteration. And then the next episode, we're going to start building the frame around everything, and we're really going to hope that everything is going to work out the way that we need it to in order for this bot to be successful. As long as we keep the CPU and the block count under control while making all the connections that we need to make and making them as strong as we can make them, then I think we'll be okay. So if you want to be notified when I add those videos, you can subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on social media. Links for social media always in the information section below the video. Please leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.